The first gift my children gave me at my 70th birthday party was a suitcase with my name tied to the handle. The second was a stack of assisted living and financial papers. My daughter, Laura, had placed the suitcase beside my cake where everyone could see it. It was the small navy case I kept in the hall closet. A corner of my blue robe showed beneath the zipper. My son Eric placed a pen on top of the papers. "Mom," he said quietly, "this is for your own good." The private dining room became still. Laura stood behind my chair with one hand resting on it. She wore the calm smile of someone waiting for applause. She told our family that I could no longer safely manage a large house by myself. She said, a room had been arranged for me at Willow Creek Assisted Living. I would move there Monday morning. I studied the cake, the suitcase, and the pen. No one had asked whether I wanted to go. At the far end of the table, Thomas Reed sat with a thin leather file closed in front of him. Laura had invited him because she wanted the paperwork to look official. She believed he was there to help her complete the transition. I lifted the trustee resignation from the stack and studied the blank signature line. "Is this the last signature they need?" I asked. Eric stared at the table. Laura answered too quickly. "Mother, this isn't the time to confuse everyone with financial details." I turned toward Thomas. He had not spoken. That was exactly what I had asked him to do. "Mr. Reed, is this the last signature they need to move the $480,000? Thomas reached for the file. Laura's hand left the back of my chair. 3 weeks earlier, neither of my children knew I had already learned why that signature mattered. 3 weeks before the party, my life did not feel like something that needed to be taken over. I woke at 6, made coffee, and opened the curtains above the kitchen sink. The house was quiet, but it was not empty in the way Laura liked to describe it. My husband had been gone 6 years. His absence still occupied certain places. The chair near the window, the hook where he used to hang his keys, the empty side of the bed, but I had learned how to live around it. I paid my own bills. I drove myself to appointments. I kept the house in good order. For 32 years, I had supervised payroll for the city. I was not an investment expert and I had no interest in pretending otherwise. But I knew how to read a number, match it to a record, and ask why it was there. That morning, Laura called before I finished my coffee. "Did you take your medication?" "I don't take morning medication." She paused. "I meant your vitamins." "You've never asked me about my vitamins." She laughed, but the sound felt practiced. "I'm just checking on you." Laura had recently begun checking on things that had never concerned her before. Whether I had locked the back door, whether I had left the stove on, whether I had paid the property insurance, every question carried the same quiet suggestion. Perhaps I could no longer be trusted with ordinary decisions. That afternoon, Eric stopped by to fix a loose cabinet hinge. He finished quickly, then remained at the kitchen table without touching the coffee I poured him. "Laura says the house is becoming a lot for you," he said. "Laura doesn't live here. She worries." "So do you." He rubbed his thumb across a scratch in the tabletop. "I just think it might be easier if you let us handle more." "More of what?" He looked toward the window. Before he could answer, his phone lit up with Laura's name. He turned it face down. I had always thought of my children as very different people. Laura was forceful. Eric avoided conflict. Laura made decisions. Eric let them happen, but when he hit her call, I understood something had changed. They were not worrying separately, they were planning together. Hunvrongerlands. I had spent most of my adult life making sure Laura and Eric never fell too hard. When Laura bought her first house, I helped with the down payment. When the grandchildren's tuition increased, I covered the difference for 2 years without making her ask twice. Eric's repair business had struggled more than once. I paid overdue insurance the first time. The second time, I helped him catch up with suppliers. I called it helping. My husband used to call it cushioning the landing. "You can't keep removing every consequence," he told me once. "They'll start thinking the ground belongs to them." At the time, I thought he was being too stern. After he died, I became even more generous. Money gave me a reason to hear from my children. Solving their problems made me feel needed. I did not notice when gratitude became expectation. Laura came by that Friday with a glossy brochure for Willow Creek. She placed it on my kitchen counter between the fruit bowl and the mail. "I'm not moving," I said. "You haven't even looked at it." "I don't need to study a place I'm not moving to." She opened the brochure anyway. "You'd have meals, transportation, and people around you. You wouldn't have to manage this entire house. I manage it now, for now. The words landed softly, but they were not soft. Laura turned a page and pointed to a bright room with staged flowers on the table. We're talking about independence, Mom. Not taking anything away from you. Then why does it sound as though you've already chosen the room? Her hand stopped on the page. Only for a second, then she smiled. I'm gathering options. She slid the brochure closer. A yellow tab marked one of the floor plans. Someone had already circled a room number. I closed the brochure. You can uncircle it. It doesn't hurt to be prepared. Prepared for what? For the future. My future? Our families. She picked up her purse before I could ask what that meant. At the door, she turned back. You've always told us families should plan before there's a crisis. There is no crisis. Not yet. After she left, I opened the brochure again. The circled room was available, beginning the Monday after my birthday. That date meant nothing to me then. Within a week, it would explain almost everything. The following Monday, Laura and Eric came together. That alone was unusual. Eric normally visited when Laura was busy. Laura preferred conversations where no one interrupted her. They arrived shortly after 4. Laura carried a folder. Eric brought no tools. We want your birthday to be special, Laura began. That sounds expensive. It doesn't have to be. She glanced at Eric. We booked the private room you like, the one where you and Dad celebrated your anniversary. I thanked them, though something in her tone made the celebration sound more like a meeting. Eric leaned forward. A lot of people care about you, Mom. I know. And they want to know you're safe. There it was again. Laura opened the folder but kept the papers angled toward herself. We've been talking about the future, she said. The house, your finances. What happens if something goes wrong? If something goes wrong, you call me. This is exactly the problem, she said. You think being able to answer a phone means you can manage everything alone. Eric shifted in his chair. That's not what she meant. It is what she meant. Laura closed the folder. For the first time, the pleasant concern left her face. You should consider letting us handle the trust, she said. It would take pressure off you. The trust is not pressuring me. Every decision still needs your signature. Yes, that is how my decisions work. Eric looked down. Laura did not. She told me Willow Creek could hold the room only a little longer. She said the house would sell well before winter. She said Eric could manage repairs and she could handle the listing. Each sentence began with concern and ended with control. I asked the simplest question I could think of. Which part of this have I agreed to? Neither of them answered. Laura placed both hands on the folder. Mom, the family has already agreed. Your birthday is when we need to make it official. Official with whom? We'll explain everything then. They left before 5. The Willow Creek brochure remained on my counter. The circled room was still visible inside it. At 4:42, my phone rang. The screen showed a name I usually saw only during annual account reviews, Thomas Reed from the trust office. I answered. Mrs. Mercer, he said, I need to verify an instruction we received. Did you authorize a transfer of $480,000 from the Mercer Family Living Trust? Thomas asked. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. I moved away from the counter and sat at the kitchen table. No, Thomas did not react with surprise. His voice remained measured, the way it always did during account reviews. Did you authorize anyone to submit the request on your behalf? No. Have you resigned as trustee? I looked at the Willow Creek brochure Laura had left behind. No, I have not. Thomas paused. Then I'm placing the request on administrative hold. What request, exactly? He explained that Laura had contacted the trust office about transferring $480,000 from the trust's investment account. She described it as a family asset restructuring. The phrase sounded respectable enough to belong in a brochure. Where was the money supposed to go? To an escrow account connected to a real estate purchase. Whose purchase? Another careful pause. Your daughter is listed as the buyer. I stared at the kitchen window. The porch light reflected against the glass, turning the room behind me into a faint second image. Lahazar had sat at my table less than an hour earlier, and told me the family had agreed I could no longer manage my finances. She had not mentioned asking for nearly $500,000. Did she tell you I approved this? The submission states that you intend to resign as acting trustee. It also states that your successor trustees will complete the transaction. My successor trustees being Laura and Eric, yes. Thomas's tone did not accuse them. He was stating what the records showed. What happens if I do nothing? The transfer cannot be completed under your daughter's current authority. We still need to determine whether this was an error, a preliminary request, or something she expected you to approve. It was a careful answer. Thomas could stop a questionable transaction. He could not tell me why my children had submitted it. Has Laura been told you're calling me? No. You are the acting trustee, so verification came directly to you. I looked down at my hands, they were steady. Keep the request on hold, I said. Please don't contact her until I understand what she submitted. Thomas agreed to send me a secure copy the following morning. Before ending the call, he asked one more question. Mrs. Mercer, has anyone recently asked you to sign documents concerning the trust? I pictured the folder Laura had kept angled away from me. Not yet. When I hung up, I opened the Willow Creek brochure again. The room Laura had circled was available beginning the Monday after my birthday. Her timetable had not begun with concern for my safety. It had begun with a closing date. Hongrangurla. The secure message arrived at 8:12 the next morning. I printed the transfer request and carried it to the dining table. For most of my career, numbers had told me what people preferred not to say aloud. A missing deduction, a duplicated payment, a total that almost matched but did not. My stakes left patterns, so did plans. The document named the Mercer Family Living Trust as the source of funds. The amount was $480,000. The destination was an escrow account tied to Laura's proposed purchase of an old school building. She planned to convert it into apartments for older adults. I had heard her describe the project before. Independent living with dignity, she had called it. My daughter wanted to build independence for strangers with money she could access only by taking mine away. Near the bottom of the request was a note. The current trustee was expected to resign before funding. Expected, not asked, not considering, expected. My phone rang while the paper was still in front of me. Laura. I folded the request before answering. I wanted to make sure Monday didn't upset you, she said. You and Eric came into my house and discussed selling it. We discussed options. You said the family had already agreed, she sighed. Mom, I don't want every conversation to become an argument. Then stop making decisions for me. Her silence lasted long enough for me to hear the calculation behind it. We're trying to simplify things, she said. Thomas Reed will be at the party. He can explain the trust paperwork so you won't have to make another appointment. I looked at the folded transfer request. You invited Thomas? He needs to verify a few signatures. It's more convenient this way. For whom? For everyone. A word large enough to include the whole family while excluding me. What documents is he supposed to verify? Nothing dramatic. A trustee form. Some financial authorization. We'll go through it at the party. Why there? Because Eric will be present, and we need both successor trustees available. She had said more than she intended. Her voice softened. Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I unfolded the request. What happens if I don't sign? Laura stopped breathing for a second, then she laughed. Why wouldn't you? That wasn't my question. We have commitments. We? The family. How much have you committed? Her tone sharpened. This isn't something you need to worry about. The sentence was meant to sound protective. Instead, it confirmed that my money was already being discussed as though it had left my hands. Laura ended the call by telling me what time she would pick me up for the party. She did not ask whether I wanted her to. Afterward, I called Thomas. My daughter says you're coming to my birthday to verify my resignation. She asked whether I could attend for an in-person review, he said. I told her I would need to speak with you first. Would your attendance approve the transfer? No. I could verify whether any resignation was voluntary and properly signed. The transfer would still require a separate review. Then come. Thomas was quiet. Are you certain? No, I said, but I want to see what they place in front of me. Eric came by 2 days later, with a bakery menu Laura had sent him. He stood in my kitchen pretending to compare cake flavors while avoiding every question I asked. Chocolate or lemon? He said. Why does Laura need $480,000? His fingers stopped halfway down the page. I don't know what you're talking about. You've never been a good liar, Eric. He set the menu down. Did Laura tell you something? No, Thomas Reed did. The color left his face. It began around his mouth and moved upward. He pulled out a chair but did not sit. Mom, you have to understand. I'm listening. It isn't like she's taking the money and disappearing. That is not a sentence people use when nothing is being taken. He rubbed both hands over his face. The building is a good project. Laura has put years into it. And that makes my trust responsible for funding it. She thought the family could invest. Did she ask me? Eric looked away. She knew you'd say no before hearing the details, so she decided my answer didn't count. That's not what I said. It is exactly what you said. His phone began vibrating on the table. Laura's name appeared on the screen. He declined the call. It rang again. This time he answered and walked toward the doorway, as though 6 feet would make the conversation private. "I'm at Mom's," he said. I could hear Laura's voice but not her words. Eric lowered his own. "No, she knows about the request." Another pause. "I don't know. Thomas must have called her." Laura spoke longer this time. Eric turned his back to me. "I need to know my 85 is still coming after closing." He went still the instant the words left his mouth. So did I. Laura's reply came fast and sharp through the phone. Eric ended the call without saying goodbye. He remained facing the doorway. $85,000? I asked. He turned slowly. "My business is short on cash." "That doesn't answer my question." She said there would be money left after the purchase. Money left from my trust. It was supposed to be temporary. Was I supposed to know about your temporary use of my money? His jaw tightened. "I've spent my whole life watching Laura get everything she wanted because she knew how to ask you. And you decided not asking at all was fairer. That's not fair." "No, Eric, it isn't. For years, I had thought of Laura as forceful and Eric as easily led. That allowed me to excuse him before he asked to be excused, but he had known I had not agreed. He had known Laura needed my signature, and he had already assigned $85,000 of my money to his own problems. "Did you help her choose the Willow Creek room?" His eyes dropped to the brochure. "She said you'd be safer there." That was not my question. After a long silence, he nodded. Something between us changed. Eric was no longer the son caught between his mother and his sister. He had chosen a side. Before leaving, he placed the bakery menu beside the brochure. "Mom, please don't ruin everything over one transaction." One transaction? He left without answering. On the menu, the message Laura had chosen for the cake was printed in block letters. "Ogo New Beginnings." That evening, Laura arrived without calling. She entered using the key I had given her years earlier for emergencies. She carried the same folder from Monday. "I spoke to Eric," she said. "I assumed you would. He shouldn't have discussed the numbers with you. He doesn't understand the structure. Do I?" Her eyes moved to the printed transfer request on the dining table. For the first time since these conversations began, Laura looked uncertain. "You printed it?" "Yes, Thomas had no right to alarm you before we could explain. He called the acting trustee about money leaving her trust." "You're making it sound dishonest." "Then make it sound honest." She placed the folder on the table but kept one hand over it. "The school property is worth far more than the purchase price. Once it's converted, the trust would benefit. The request does not say the trust is buying the building. It's a preliminary document. It names you as the buyer." Laura pulled out a chair. "I have spent 18 months putting this together. I found the property. I negotiated the price. I arranged the development. I already have $72,000 tied up in the deposit. Your money?" "A credit line. Secured by what? My house." The urgency beneath her concern finally had a shape. Laura had risked $72,000. She could not easily afford to lose. She had promised Eric $85,000 she did not possess. And she had built the rest of the plan around money she expected me to surrender. "The deposit is non-refundable," she said. "If we miss closing, I lose it. You made that commitment before I approved the investment. I knew you'd be afraid. I'm not afraid of the investment. I'm concerned about the person who tried to fund it without asking me." Her face hardened. "This is why we need to make changes. You read one document and assume the worst because you don't understand how these transactions work. The strategy was clear. If I disagreed, I was confused. If I asked questions, I did not understand. If I said no, my judgment had failed." Laura opened the folder and removed a single page. The heading read, "Resignation of Trustee." She placed it in front of me. "This would let Eric and me manage the trust without bothering you over every detail." "I'm not bothered." "Mom, you are 70 years old. You know what I mean." "Yes," I said. "I do." She pushed the page closer. "You don't have to wait. Sign it now and we can take care of the rest." I studied the signature line for several seconds. Neither of us moved. Then I folded my hands in my lap. "No." Laura stared at me as though I had broken an agreement she had made with herself. "You're putting both your children at risk." "No. You did that when you promised them money that belonged to neither of you. She returned the resignation form to the folder. The party is already arranged. Thomas will be there, the family will be there. We will discuss this when everyone is calm. She picked up the folder and walked toward the door before leaving. She turned. I hope you won't embarrass yourself in front of people who care about you. After the door closed, I called Thomas. I want the transfer kept on hold. It already is. I also want a complete copy of the trust agreement and every document Laura submitted. I can have them ready tomorrow. And Thomas? Yes. Do not tell either of my children that I asked. I placed the Willow Creek brochure, the transfer request, and the bakery menu into one neat stack. Laura believed the birthday party would give her witnesses. It was beginning to look as though it might give me the same thing. Thomas met me the following morning in a small conference room at the trust office. The Mercer Family Living Trust agreement lay open between us. Beside it was Laura's transfer request. Thomas turned the agreement toward me. You and your husband created this as a revocable living trust, he said. You are now the sole acting trustee. You are also the person the trust is meant to support during your lifetime. And Laura and Eric? They are successor co-trustees. Their authority begins only if you resign voluntarily, or if the incapacity provision is properly activated. I found the section he had marked. The language was formal, but the meaning was simple. If I chose to step down, I had to sign a written resignation. If someone claimed I could no longer manage the trust, 2 independent physicians had to certify that in writing. Moving into assisted living doesn't activate this? No. Turning 70? No. Needing help around the house? Also no. Laura had spoken as though choosing a room for me gave her authority over everything attached to my name. It gave her nothing. Thomas pointed to another section. Even if your children became successor trustees someday, they would have a legal duty to use the trust for your benefit while you are alive. Could Laura transfer the money into her own project? Not simply because she was trustee. A transaction that benefited her personally would require careful review. She could not treat the trust's money as her own. Cash and investments in the trust totaled approximately $487,600. Laura's request would have taken nearly all of it. My daughter calls this a family investment. The escrow instructions list Laura Mercer Hale as the buyer, Thomas said. The trust is not listed as an owner of the building, so my trust would provide the money, but the property would belong to her. That is what the current documents indicate. Laura had not simply proposed a risky investment without consulting me. She had arranged for my money to leave my control while the property remained in hers. Can I remove Laura and Eric as successor trustees? As long as you remain competent, the trust can be amended. I did not ask him to prepare the amendment, not yet. Removing their names would protect the future. It would not tell me how far they had already gone in the present. Thomas handed me another page. It was Laura's request that he attend my birthday party for an in-person verification. She wrote that I would resign there. She said your family intended to complete the transition during the celebration. Did she mention Willow Creek? She said your move had already been arranged. Already, before changing anything, I needed to make sure Laura could not turn my refusal into proof that I no longer understood my affairs. I want an independent evaluation of my capacity. Thomas nodded. That would create a clear record of your condition now. It would not replace the trust's 2-physician requirement if incapacity were ever claimed. I understand. I closed the trust agreement. For the first time since Laura began talking about my safety, I knew exactly where my authority began. I also knew which argument she intended to use to take it away. The doctor did not ask whether I loved my children. He asked why I had requested the appointment. I told him they wanted me to surrender control of a family trust. He asked me to describe the situation in my own words. The trust holds my home and liquid assets for my benefit, I said. I am still the acting trustee. My daughter has requested a transfer of $480,000 into an escrow account for a property she is buying. What are your children asking you to sign? A trustee resignation, financial authority, an assisted living agreement, and documents concerning the sale of my house. What would happen if you signed? They would claim the right to manage the trust and make decisions I have not approved. Why are you refusing? Because I do not want to move. I did not authorize the transaction, and I do not trust the people asking me to surrender control. There were memory exercises after that, numbers to repeat. words to recall, questions about consequences, choices, and financial risk. I answered them. The difficult part was not the test. It was sitting in a quiet office and proving that I still belonged to myself. By the end of the appointment, I had a written statement confirming that I understood my assets, the documents under discussion, and the consequences of accepting or refusing them. The letter did not make me competent. It recorded what had already been true. It also did not replace the trust's requirement for 2 physicians if anyone tried to declare me incapacitated. It simply documented my condition on that day. I placed the original inside my purse. When I returned home, a message from Laura was waiting. Willow Creek had confirmed Monday morning. She said the family would explain the transition at my party so everyone understood. Then she added one final instruction. Please don't make separate plans. She had scheduled my move without my consent. Now she was warning me not to interfere with it. I called Thomas. I received the medical letter. Keep the original somewhere secure. Send us a copy when you're ready. I'll bring it to the party. He paused. You are still planning to attend. It is my birthday. I meant the document meeting. So did I. That afternoon, Thomas sent the rest of the records Laura had provided. Her transfer request included a funding deadline shortly after my birthday. The escrow company expected the money once the change in trustee authority had been verified. The timing was precise: birthday, signature, move on Monday, closing soon afterward. Laura had built the sequence around the assumption that I would be too embarrassed to refuse in front of our family. I spread the trust agreement, transfer request, medical letter, and Willow Creek brochure across my dining table. For years, I had cleaned up problems before my children felt their full weight. A missed payment, a bad decision, an emergency that had become predictable. This time, Laura had risked her house and promised Eric money before asking whether I would participate. If I rescued them again, they would call it consent. The following morning, Laura called to discuss what she described as party logistics. By the end of the conversation, I knew the birthday cake was not the only thing she intended to place in front of me. Laura began with the menu. The hotel needs the final meal count, she said. And Eric chose lemon cake. He showed me the menu. She hesitated. Did he say anything else? He said enough. Laura moved past that quickly. We should also review the documents before Saturday. What documents? You know what documents? I know about the trustee resignation. What else have you prepared? Her answer came slowly, as though she were deciding how much honesty I could handle. The Willow Creek residence agreement, a durable financial power of attorney, the trustee form, and a listing agreement for the house. 4 documents: me, represent me, bit me, sell the house. Did you prepare a listing agreement naming yourself as the agent? It isn't signed yet. You'll sign it at the party. I never said I was selling. The house can't sit empty. It won't be empty. I'll be living in it. Laura exhaled sharply. We have been through this. No, you have been through it with Eric. I was not included. You're making every practical decision sound cruel. You arranged my move without asking me. We reserved a room. That is not the same thing. You chose the date, because Monday works for everyone. Not for me. She was quiet for several seconds, then she said, the photographer can come after you move. Eric will handle anything that needs fixing. She did not intend to leave the house available for me to return to. Once I left, the listing would begin. Once I signed the power of attorney, Laura could approach banks and service providers as my representative. Once I resigned as trustee, she and Eric would present themselves as the people in charge. Each document alone could be described as assistance. Together, they removed me from every part of my own life. Eric arrived while Laura was still on the phone. Is she there? Laura asked. Yes. Put me on speaker. I did. Laura's voice filled the kitchen. We need both of you to understand that the closing deadline is real. If Mom refuses to cooperate, I lose $72,000. Eric looked at me, and I lose the money she promised me. Laura snapped. That isn't helping. No, I said. It is honest. Eric sat down. Mom, nobody wants to hurt you. Then tell Laura to cancel the move. He looked toward the phone. Laura answered for him. We can't keep changing everything because you're frightened. She needed me to appear frightened, confused, or unreasonable. Otherwise, she was simply a daughter trying to force her mother out of her house to finance a private deal. Laura, do you understand that moving into assisted living does not make me legally incapacitated? She did not answer immediately. Thomas can explain the technical language at the party. That was not my question. We'll discuss it Saturday. The call ended. Eric remained at the table. You know I haven't lost my mind, I said. I know. You know I don't want to move. Yes. You know Laura requested the money before I agreed. His eyes lowered. Yes. It was the first time he had admitted all three things without hiding behind concern. Then why are you still helping her? His answer was nearly a whisper. Because if the deal fails, both of us are in trouble. Not my safety, not my health, their trouble. After Eric left, I called Thomas. At the party, do not explain anything until I ask you directly. I understand. Laura intended to use the room against me. I had decided to let the room hear every word. On the morning of my birthday, I placed three things inside my purse: the medical letter, the transfer request for $480,000, a copy of the trust provisions governing resignation and incapacity. Thomas would bring the official file. I would bring proof that I understood it. Before leaving the house, I stood in the hallway and looked toward the bedroom where my husband's photograph still sat on the dresser. For years, I had believed keeping the family together meant absorbing whatever pressure threatened to pull it apart. I no longer believed that. Laura arrived precisely on time. She came inside without waiting for invitation and looked around the living room. Are you ready? Yes, you don't need to bring a bag. I wasn't planning to. Something passed across her face, then disappeared. The drive to the hotel was quiet. Laura spoke only once. She reminded me that several relatives had made time to attend. She said everyone wanted the day to remain pleasant. It was another warning not to resist publicly. When we reached the private dining room, the first thing I saw was "The Cake Doll New Beginnings" was written across the top in white icing. The second thing I saw was my navy suitcase. It stood beside the cake table with a luggage tag tied to the handle. Judith Mercer, Willow Creek. Laura had entered my home, taken the suitcase from the hall closet, gone into my bedroom, and packed it without telling me. I walked closer. A corner of my blue robe showed beneath the zipper. The Willow Creek brochure rested on top, open to the circled room. You packed my things. Only enough for the first few days, Laura said. Eric can bring anything else later. Eric stood near the dining table. He did not look at me. A neat stack of papers waited beside my place setting. 4 colored tabs marked 4 signature pages: the Willow Creek Agreement, a durable financial power of attorney, my resignation as trustee, a listing agreement for the house. Thomas sat at the far end of the room with a slim leather file in front of him. Our eyes met. He gave no sign that we had spoken. That was what I had asked for. Laura took my coat and guided me toward the head of the table. You'll feel better once the uncertainty is over. I'm not uncertain. She pretended not to hear. Guests began taking their seats. Laura moved around the room, greeting everyone, calm and confident. Eric stayed near the papers. He touched the pen once, then moved it half an inch closer to my chair. I sat down. The suitcase remained visible beside the cake, displayed like a decoration. I opened my purse just far enough to feel the edge of the medical letter. Thomas's file remained closed. Laura waited until the room had settled. Then she stood beside my chair, lifted her glass, and tapped it gently with a spoon. I'd like everyone's attention, she said. Before we celebrate Mom's birthday, Eric and I need to share an important family decision. Laura kept one hand on the back of my chair as she addressed the room. Mom has always been independent, she began. But lately, Eric and I have become concerned about her safety. Several people looked toward me. Laura's hand tightened slightly against the chair. She's been managing a large house alone. There are financial responsibilities, maintenance issues, and daily decisions that have become overwhelming. Nothing had become overwhelming. Laura did not look at me when she said it. She looked at the people she had invited to witness my surrender. So we've arranged a beautiful room for her at Willow Creek. She'll have meals, transportation, and support. She won't have to worry about anything. She gestured toward the suitcase. She'll move Monday morning. The announcement landed as if the date had been chosen by a doctor instead of my daughter. A few uncertain murmurs passed around the table. No one congratulated her. Eric stepped forward and placed the pen directly on top of the papers. We're trying to make this easy for you, Mom. Easy for me? His eyes moved toward Laura. She answered instead. There's no reason to turn this into a confrontation. I haven't said anything yet. Laura smiled again. That smile was not for me. It was for the room. She lifted the first document. This is simply the Willow Creek Residence Agreement. She set it down and lifted the second. This allows Eric and me to help with banking, bills, and other financial matters. The financial power of attorney, the third paper, came next. This lets us manage the trust so Mom doesn't have to deal with complicated investment decisions. My resignation as trustee, then the last. And this will allow us to prepare the house for sale once she's settled. The listing agreement, 4 papers, 4 quiet removals, my home, my finances, my trust, my right to return. Laura placed them in a neat stack and pushed them toward me. Thomas is here to make sure everything is handled correctly. Every face turned toward the far end of the table. Thomas remained seated. His file was still closed. Laura looked annoyed that he had not immediately supported her. "Mr. Reed?" she prompted. Thomas looked at me. "Mrs. Mercer has not asked me a question." The control Laura had built around the room shifted by one small degree. She recovered quickly. "Of course. Mom, you can ask him anything after you sign." "After?" "The documents are straightforward." I picked up the residence agreement. A move-in date had already been entered. Monday. I picked up the power of attorney. Laura's name appeared first. Eric's appeared beneath hers. Then I lifted the trustee resignation. Laura leaned closer. "That one only removes the burden of administration." "Does it?" "Yes. And after I sign it, you and Eric become acting trustees. That is how succession works." She made it sound natural, almost overdue. Eric slid the pen closer. "Just sign, Mom." I turned the resignation page toward Thomas. "Is this the last signature they need to move the $480,000? Conversation stopped. Silverware stopped. Even the small sounds of shifting chairs disappeared. Laura's hand left the back of my chair. "What are you talking about?" I kept my eyes on Thomas. He reached for the leather file. For the first time that afternoon, Laura stopped smiling. Thomas opened the file but did not remove anything yet. Laura stepped between him and the table. "There is no reason to discuss private financial matters in front of everyone." "You invited him," I said, "to explain the transition." "What transition?" "The one we have been discussing for weeks. You have been discussing it. I have been refusing it." Several guests shifted in their seats. Laura lowered her voice. "Mother, you are confused about what this transaction is." That was the moment I had prepared for. I opened my purse and placed the medical letter on the table. "I was independently evaluated 10 days ago." Laura stared at it. "The doctor confirmed that I understand my assets, these documents, and the consequences of signing or refusing them." Eric looked at Laura. She did not look back. "This is unnecessary," she said. "No one said you were incompetent. You told everyone here that I could no longer manage my life. I said you needed support. You arranged my move. You packed my suitcase. You prepared to sell my house. And you asked me to resign from my trust. Because you keep resisting practical help." Thomas removed the transfer request from his file. I faced him. "You have my permission to discuss the request here. Please answer my question." He placed the document on the table where the amount could be seen. The trust office received an instruction requesting the transfer of $480,000 from the Mercer Family Living Trust. Laura folded her arms. "It was a preliminary investment request." Thomas continued. "The proposed recipient was an escrow account connected to a property purchase controlled by Miss Hale." I looked at him. "Would the trust own any part of that property?" "Not according to the documents submitted to our office." Laura's face tightened. "That was going to be revised after closing." "After my money was transferred?" "The property is worth more than the purchase price." I was creating value for the family. The request listed you as the buyer, because someone had to move quickly. "And the trust?" She did not answer. Thomas indicated the trustee resignation. "Mrs. Mercer is currently the sole acting trustee. Neither successor trustee has authority to direct the transfer while she remains in that role." Laura turned toward him. "You said the transaction could proceed once the succession documents were complete." "I said our office would review any properly submitted documents. I did not say the transfer was approved. You knew about the closing deadline." "The closing deadline does not change Mrs. Mercer's authority." Eric sat down. The papers no longer looked official. They looked desperate. Laura reached for the transfer request. I placed my hand over it first. "You asked for nearly every liquid dollar in the trust. It was an investment. An investment I was not allowed to consider before you committed my money. You would have said no." "Yes." There was no confusion in my answer. No hesitation. Only the word she had designed the entire party to avoid. I moved the pen away from the stack. "I will not sign the Willow Creek agreement." I placed it to my left. I will not give either of you power of attorney. The second document joined the first. I will not resign as trustee, then the third, and I will not authorize the sale of my house. I placed the listing agreement on top of the others. Thomas closed his file. The transfer will not be processed. Laura looked around as though someone else might overrule me. No one did. Then Eric spoke. His voice was low. We were only trying to settle things before it became harder. I looked at him. Before what became harder? He swallowed. Before we had to deal with all of this after you were gone. That was when the money stopped being the worst part. Laura turned sharply toward Eric. That is not what we agreed to say. He looked exhausted. I'm tired of saying this is about safety. She lowered her voice. Be quiet. No, I said. Let him finish. Eric's hands rested flat on the table. We thought it would be better to organize everything now, before there were arguments later. After you. He could not complete the sentence. He did not need to. They had already divided the future. Laura would get her building. Eric would receive his $85,000. The house would be sold. The trust would be under their control. And I would be in a room at Willow Creek, alive but conveniently removed from every decision that mattered. Laura stepped closer. This was supposed to protect the family. From what? From losing the opportunity. From Eric's business failing. From having the house decline in value. From waiting until there was a crisis. There was no crisis until you created one. I put $72,000 at risk because this project could change all of our lives. It has changed mine. Her expression softened, but only because people were watching. You would have benefited too. I would have benefited from losing control of my money. You would have been cared for. I looked at the suitcase beside the cake. My robe was still caught in the zipper. You chose my room. Laura said nothing. You packed my bag. Her eyes moved away. You prepared to list my house and divided my money. Eric lowered his head. What part of your plan required me to be alive? Except the signature? No one moved. Laura's face changed not into guilt, into anger. You are humiliating us. The suitcase stood 10 feet away with my name tied to its handle. You brought my packed belongings to my birthday party. We were trying to make the transition easier. For whom? She could not answer without telling the truth. Thomas returned the transfer request to his file. Mrs. Mercer, the administrative hold will remain in place. No transfer will occur under the current request. Laura looked at him. If the money doesn't arrive, I lose the deposit. Thomas did not respond. That consequence did not belong to him. It did not belong to me either. Eric pushed back his chair. What about the 85? Laura stared at him as though his question had betrayed her more than anything I had said. There is no 85 if there is no closing. He looked at me. For years, that look would have worked. Fear. Shame. A silent request for me to fix what he had helped break. I had seen it when insurance payments were late and suppliers stopped extending credit. Each time I had called my help an act of love. This time, I let the silence remain. I'm not rescuing either of you from this. Eric's shoulders dropped. Laura picked up the listing agreement. You understand that the house will become harder to manage. That will be my decision. And when something happens, I will have a plan that does not require you to profit from it. I stood and walked to the suitcase. The tag tore easily when I pulled it from the handle. I placed it on top of the unsigned documents. Then I wheeled my suitcase away from the cake. I did not cut it. I did not make a speech. I simply left the room with the one thing my children had packed for my disappearance. The following morning, I called Thomas. I'm ready to change the successor trustees. This time, the decision was mine before the paperwork existed. The transfer request was formally closed after I confirmed that I would not resign. Laura did not receive the $480,000. Without it, she could not complete the purchase. She lost the $72,000 deposit and remained responsible for the credit line she had used to fund it. Within the following months, she sold one of her own assets to reduce the debt. I did not celebrate that, but I did not prevent it. The difference mattered. Eric never received the $85,000 Laura had promised him. He sold one of his company trucks. He accepted fewer jobs and began paying his suppliers in smaller installments. His business survived. It simply became the size it could support without my money. 2 weeks after my birthday, Eric came to my house alone. He waited on the porch after knocking. Even though his key had once opened the door, I had changed the locks. When I let him in, he stopped beside the dining table. The Willow Creek brochure was gone. The transfer request had been filed away. The bakery menu had been thrown out. "I'm sorry," he said. I waited. He looked toward the kitchen. "I knew you didn't want to move. I knew you understood what was happening. I kept telling myself Laura had a plan and that you would be comfortable." "And the $85,000? He nodded. "I wanted it. It was not a complete apology, but it was the first honest one. I don't know when I'll trust you again. I know. I'm not paying your suppliers. I know. And you will not discuss my finances with Laura." He met my eyes. "I understand." He began visiting again after that, but differently. He called first. He asked before fixing things. He did not mention money. I did not confuse those changes with repair. They were only the beginning. Laura stayed away longer. When she finally called, she still described the project as a lost opportunity. "I was trying to build something for all of us," she said. "You were trying to build it with money you did not own. You know I would never have left you without care. You left me without a voice." She had no answer for that. Our relationship did not end. But it no longer operated under the assumption that time would erase what she had done. Thomas arranged the amendment paperwork for the Mercer Family Living Trust. Laura and Eric were removed as successor trustees. An independent trust company would take over only if I voluntarily stepped down, or if the incapacity requirements were properly satisfied. I remained the acting trustee. I remained in my house. I made practical changes because I chose them, not because my children used them as evidence against me. I arranged help when I needed it. I also created a plan for the day I might truly be unable to make my own decisions. That possibility no longer frightened me. What frightened me had been losing my rights while I was still fully capable of using them. One quiet afternoon, I sat at the same dining table where Laura had pushed the resignation form toward me. The trust amendment waited in front of me. Thomas had marked the signature line. I read every page. Then I signed. For years, I had believed love meant standing between my children and every consequence that might hurt them. But protection without boundaries had taught them the wrong lesson. They had begun to believe my help was an entitlement, my aging was an opportunity, and my silence was consent. The lesson I learned at 70 was simpler. Helping someone does not give them ownership of your life. I closed the folder and placed the pen beside it. At my birthday party, Eric had pushed a pen toward me because he wanted my surrender. This time, no one pushed it toward me. I picked it up myself.